Xander Ridgeford, Strader General, December 3rd, Earth Year, 2103. Metallic groans of complaint rocked the Megalodon's bridge as we slipped out of subspace, arriving within the auto shipyard's general vicinity. With every recent shift between subspace and prime space, these disturbances caused by our faulty FTL drive had grown in magnitude until it felt like the ship was about to rattle itself apart. "We're lucky," began Parak, his quills smoothing over with relief upon finding us to still be alive. "If we had used the drive just a clawful more times, it's possible our exotic particle shielding would have given out and we'd be shredded." "Don't remind me," I growled, pulling up Meg's sensory data on the screen in front of my chair and fiddling with settings until an image of our target fizzled into view. Orbiting a gas giant on the system's outer rim, the automated shipyard's chrome lattice of interlocking beams and corridors, outlined by floodlights, formed a sort of hollow pyramid that glittered against the patchwork of distant stars. Dozens of massive hangar bays meant to accommodate even dreadnought-class ships laid empty on the tetrahedron's surface, beckoning us forth. "Looks like we're the only customers," murmured Avery, accessing the ship's sensors in search of any other drive signatures. The drones weren't FTL capable, but their shielding nevertheless required similar, albeit smaller, cores to function, causing them to appear on screen as dim red splotches. Besides our own vessels, no signals strong enough to indicate FTL ships appeared. This, of course, was to be expected given how the shipyard was from the center of Council space. Despite bearing 6 rocky planets, each roughly Earth-sized, there was no life to be found in this system. "Why even build a damn shipyard in the middle of nowhere?" she asked. Approaching her seat and leaning forward to access the computer she was using, Parak typed in a few commands to pull up on her screen the image of a barren rock. The Engril were going to terraform that planet, but the core was too far gone to jumpstart, so they abandoned the project. This shipyard was constructed anticipating a colony. Sliding his hands off of Avery's keyboard, I couldn't help but cringe as I saw the Inzar's claws momentarily land upon her shoulders, offering an affectionate squeeze. Returning my attention to the matter at hand and enlarging the sensor window on my own screen, I highlighted the drone signatures and typed in the command to analyze their specs. 15 Cormassa brand drones with twin coil guns, nothing Meg can't handle. Mass-produced for a fraction the price of other drones, Cormassa models were notoriously shit. Their weapons weren't strong enough to pierce the heavy shielding of dreadnoughts, and buggy AI piloting systems meant they couldn't perform the impressive maneuvers regular drones were known for. In short, they were little more than show muscle. "All other vessels steer clear," I commanded through the main channel before switching to the Megalodon's bridge comms. "I want these pieces of junk taken out quick and clean. Plasma cannons get a lock on and fire as soon as we're in range. Kinetics people at ease. We don't want to waste any good ammo." With that, I assumed direct control over the ship's navigation system and brought us in closer to the shipyard. Drive signatures belonging to known Strader ships were usually blacklisted as shoot on sight by shipyard defenses, and this one was no different. Upon detecting us, the drones immediately opened fire, their projectiles bouncing harmlessly off of my baby's hull without leaving so much as a scratch. In retaliation, lances of plasma rocketed forth from the broadside of our vessel, instantly annihilating our paltry opposition in what I could only describe as an utterly anticlimactic conclusion to the fight. "Any drones worth their weight in scrap metal could have dodged that volley," hummed Parak, his inner engineer no doubt disappointed by the display. Once the Cormassas were dealt with, I reactivated Meg's autopilot and directed it to bring us into the nearest airlock sized for dreadnoughts. "All vessels facing damage, dock now or forever hold your piss," I commanded dryly, prompting a handful of vessels to enter alongside us. "Everyone else, form a defensive perimeter around the shipyard. If you see any non-allied vessels, shoot first, ask questions later, then shoot again for good measure." Suddenly, static hissed in the comms as a robotic female voice echoed out over the bridge. "I'm sorry, but your vessels are currently blacklisted from our services. Please depart from the repair bay and have a lovely rest of your journey." Inserting the thumb drive containing Wibbick's bypass code into her station's computer, Avery spent a few minutes typing and clicking to no avail. All the while, that annoying AI voice continued politely telling us to fuck off. After failing to upload the code herself, she called over Parak for assistance. The administrative AI isn't accepting uploads from our ship computers, he told me, removing the thumb drive and stuffing it into his pocket before approaching the bridge exit. I'll have to go outside and upload it directly. Like hell you will, I barked at the Xeno, standing up from my captain's chair and crossing the floor to stare him down face to face, holding out my hand expectantly. I'll do it. If there was one Xeno I trusted to do something like this, it'd be Parak, but that was a big if. I wouldn't advise that, the Inzar replied, refusing to fork over the device in his pocket. This shipyard is automated, so there's nothing to shield your eyes from its inner workings that heavily feature Archeron's law. Much as I hated to accept it, the Xeno had a point. Back when humans had tried to learn Archeron's law, the equations alone were enough to cause psychosis within weeks of consistent exposure. Just in case that wasn't bad enough, though, looking at the technology itself was significantly worse. There was a good reason only Parak and other sympathetic Xenos were allowed to perform maintenance on the FTL drive. That reason being last time one of my men tried, they hurled themselves out of the damn airlock. Lowering my hand in defeat, I allowed Parak to exit the bridge before returning to my seat. Accessing the ship's exterior cameras, I lowered the quality as far down as it would go, so as to spare my brain having to look at the meticulous array of whirring mechanisms that in their full glory would more than likely give me a seizure. Parak made his way across the hangar floor before disappearing into a service tunnel. Let's see. We're in docking bay 4, so there should be a control room not far from here. His voice came out over the comms. Just give me a few minutes to access it and I'll convince the AI to start repairs. Good. I want you back here as soon as it's done. Do you understand that, Parak? I demanded, my menacing tone drawing a glare from Avery. Yes, sir. The Inzar sighed before disconnecting from the comms channel. Whereas the Xeno seemed relatively unbothered by the way I gave commands, his human girlfriend apparently took issue with it. You don't have to be such a prick to him, she grumbled, just loudly enough for me to hear. He's been with us for years. He shot one of his own to save my life. And you've been his obedient little pet ever since, isn't that right? I snarked, stopping Avery in her verbal tracks as her face turned red with embarrassment. What? You think I don't know about the dog collar you keep under your bed? What the hell, Xander? She snapped, shooting up from her seat with an expression of outrage and stomping toward me, reaching out to grab my collar before hesitating. You can't just invade my privacy like that. Elsewhere on the bridge, Meg's crew members fell silent. Though their heads were predominantly facing the screens, I could see that most of them were watching through the corners of their vision. Last time someone had gotten up in my face like this, I did them a favor and readjusted their attitude, which just so happens to be located in the jaw. For Avery, however, I didn't even have to stand up. Last I checked, I was the captain of this damn ship. You get privacy from everyone but me. I grinned, leaning forward in my seat, practically daring her to do something about it. Avery, of course, didn't move a muscle. Just consider yourself lucky I like to keep the sleeping quarter cameras off. Honestly, it was probably a good thing that our argument was interrupted. The problem was what it had been interrupted by. Xander, sir! Shouted Captain Brad of our oldest cruiser, the Millennium. I'm picking up a drive signature coming in. Energy output looks like a destroyer. Well, what are you waiting for? I barked back. Get a lock on and blow it to high hell! Our targeting systems can't find it! Shouted Yeliz, captain of the Vicarian. We're not getting anything with a large enough cross-section to be a destroyer. Quickly entering commands on my own console to access the sensor data of Brad's cruiser, what I was met with was well and truly bizarre. They were right that there was a drive signature outputting destroyer levels of energy, but the shape displayed was blurry, a cloud of uncertainty telling us only vaguely where this ship was. Even stranger, none of our other sensors corroborated the existence of this phantom vessel. If I were a lesser experienced captain, I'd say it was just a malfunction, but I knew better. Suddenly, the fleet's communication channel lit up with shouting. This is the Minnow frigate. We've been hit. Something just... The voice cut out before it could finish. Meanwhile, on screen, I saw the Minnow's drive signature go dark. All active ships! I want a lock on this bastard yesterday! I shouted into the comms. Fire up every sensor we've got, and I want to hear when one of you has a visual. Suddenly, the docked megalodon shifted slightly, leaving the bridge floor at just enough of an angle to be inconvenient. "I've successfully uploaded the bypass code," began Parak, blissfully unaware of the chaos that had erupted in his absence. "Thank you for your patronage." The station AI began cheerfully as on my screen another 2 frigates went dark. "Please remain patient while we complete the necessary repairs. Estimated time for completion, 30 minutes. "Parak!" I shouted into the Inzar's earpiece. "Get back here now! We're under attack and we can't see what by." "What do you mean you can't see it?" he inquired, his strained voice suggesting he was now running to get back to us. Of course, Avery didn't wait for me to reply. "It's taken out 3 frigates and we can't get a lock on the drive signature." For a long time there was silence from the Inzar's end, leaving us with the panicked chatter of other ship captains as they desperately coordinated to get a good look at what we were up against. "Xander, this is Captain Bruce of the destroyer designated Mako. We have sustained serious hull damage." "I read you, Captain Bruce. Divert all power to shields and hang tight." Unfortunately, that was the best advice I could give. Hopefully, having the shields at full power would be enough of a deterrent for whoever was attacking us. Clenching my fist in a gesture of helpless fury, I watched as another frigate's drive signature blipped out on screen. "All cruisers, I want every fighter ship in your bay out and about," I boomed, racking my brain for any more bright ideas but ultimately drawing a blank. "Sir?" The Inzar's voice came out weak and breathless over the comms. "Tell every ship with a working drive to retreat. We're dealing with a martyr." Xander Ridgeford, Strader General, December 3rd, Earth Year 2103. The Martyrs. A name that struck fear into every heart beating opposed to the Council's status quo. They weren't just elite soldiers. Hell, compared to the Martyrs, every special forces unit in human history looked like a bunch of kids playing war with sticks they found in the backyard. Before, they were legends, war heroes, the best of the best. Then they volunteered to become something more. They gave up their lives, their identities, everything they once were, and in return the Council made them unstoppable. Their bodies were stripped down and rebuilt with the best cybernetics Council engineers with a bottomless budget could wet dream of. Their minds augmented with processors more powerful than an entire fleet's navigation systems. They didn't react to danger, they predicted it, calculated the optimal response before you even knew you made a mistake. Functionally immortal, practically invincible, and completely untouchable. What little organic tissue remained was barely enough to legally classify them as alive. Whether they were still the same people they had once been, or just advanced AIs puppeteering mechanized corpses, nobody knew. Nobody cared. The result was the same. Martyrs were more than mere enforcers. They were the Council's scalpel and sledgehammer rolled into one. Living weapons. Butcher priests sacrificed on an altar of order. The last thing you saw when the Council decided your continued existence was a problem that needed to be solved. And now, one of them had found us. It was no wonder none of our targeting systems could get a lock on. Their stealth fighters, each one more expensive than a dreadnought, were more than mere vessels. They were extensions of the martyr inside. A normal pilot relied on controls, displays, and buttons, but a martyr was their ship. No cockpit or manual interface needed, no sapient error involved, just a direct neural link between monster and machine. In short, we were fucked. Wiping a sheen of anxious sweat off of my forehead, I accessed a map of the galaxy and selected a barren system before uploading the coordinates to the rest of our fleet. "This is Captain Ridgeford. All vessels with a working FTL drive retreat immediately. We'll regroup at these coordinates in 2 days. Don't go straight there. Hop between systems and leave no trace." "Negative, sir. We cannot leave Meg trapped here," replied Captain Brad alongside many others who voiced similar refusals. "We can hold them off until drive repairs for your ship are complete." "That wasn't a question. It was an order," I yelled into the comms, instantly silencing the sea of dissenting voices. "There's no stopping that thing. Just get out of here. We'll be right behind you." On my computer's sensor window, most drive cores within the fleet spiked with activity before disappearing into subspace. Not all of the ships made it, however. 2 frigates, alongside the damaged Mako destroyer, went dark before they could fully prep the jump. Meanwhile, Brad's ship, the Millennium, remained stubbornly rooted in real space. "Not a chance in hell I'm leaving you all behind!" shouted the ship's captain, disconnecting from our fleet's comm system so as not to hear my repeated demand. Turning my attention away from the retreating fleet, I once again initiated contact with Parak. "Where are you?" I shouted, my mind flooded with reasonable suspicion at how much longer the return trip was taking him. "I'm headed back to the command center," panted the Inzar, his boots audibly slamming against the steel floors of a maintenance tunnel. "Repair speed is limited by safety parameters. If I can bypass them, then it might speed things up enough to get us out of here in one piece." "Don't waste your breath yapping about it. Just go," I commanded, my eyes shifting every few seconds back towards the sensor array to check that the Millennium was still there. Fighters birthed from the vessel's hull zipped about in seemingly random patterns as an invisible killer picked them off one by one, eventually leaving only the cruiser itself. When Brad's voice came back on over the comms, it was hard to even hear what he was saying over the sounds of panic on his vessel's bridge. Part of me wanted desperately to chew him out for disobeying a direct order, but there was no use in taking corrective action against a man on death's door, so I just let him talk. "We've sustained critical damage," he began, his tone unwaveringly stoic in the face of certain death. "Life support systems won't hold out for much longer, so I'm gonna overload the drive and make this quick. It was an honor fighting by your side, Captain." Funny thing about explosions in space, there's never a shockwave. Vacuums by definition lack matter to disturb. Just a few miles away from us was an explosion on par with Tsar Bomba, and nobody else on the ship noticed a damn thing. Me? I felt the weight of 400 souls pressing down upon my chest as the red dot representing Millennium expanded slightly before blinking out. No, Brad. The honor was all mine. Sitting in mournful silence, I listened in on Avery's correspondence with our Xeno engineer. "How are things looking on your end, Parak?" she asked, her voice noticeably shaking with dread. "Safety parameters are capping repair speed at 50%, he replied, his voice sounding somewhat far off, as he no doubt focused intently upon the problem at hand. "I can bypass them, but it'll take me a few minutes." Distant groans of metallic complaint shook the bridge floor. "Parak, what was that?" I demanded, at last regaining my voice to reassume the role of captain. "Checking now," the Inzar murmured, his words followed by a long pause as he fiddled with the controls. "Shutters in docking bay 6 just opened up," he replied, his tone utterly panicked. "It's here! Parak, get back to the Megalodon now!" Avery shouted into her comms device, her affection for the Xeno clearly resulting in clouded judgment. "I'm your captain and I command you to keep going!" I barked into the comms, silencing my second-in-command with a furious glare. I wouldn't sacrifice the humans aboard our ship for every Xeno in the galaxy, let alone just this one. Normally Avery knew when to shut up, but with her beloved master in danger, her decorum had gone out the window. "Parak, do not listen to him." "Get back here!" "Listen here, Parak. If you try to come back here without performing that override, so help me God, I will gun you down where you stand." And with that, I accessed the master communication controls and cut off the Xeno from comms. Within the few seconds I'd taken my eyes off of Avery to access comms controls, she had managed to get within swinging range of me, delivering a surprisingly hard punch directly to the side of my face and leaving a taste of blood upon my tongue. "Put the comms back on and tell him to come back!" she demanded, her eyes glittering with incubating tears. "If I do that, we all die," I snapped back at her as others on the bridge moved to restrain the mutineer. "Put her in the brig. We'll talk when it's all over." "Please," Avery begged as they dragged her away, struggling desperately to free herself. "You can't just let him die!" She was still screaming at me as the doors slid shut. Less than a minute after my second-in-command was removed from the bridge, that annoying shipyard AI once again piped up. "Warning, emergency repairs are in effect. All safety protocols are temporarily suspended. Please contact Kormasa Tech Support for—" Suddenly the voice cut out and was replaced by the familiar tone of our engineer. I managed to disable the protocols, but I must have done something wrong because now there's a bulkhead blocking the direction I came from. I hear its footsteps. For a moment he fell silent and I heard them too. Then, softly, he whispered, "Avery, I love you." He didn't know she wasn't on the bridge to hear his goodbye, and it was all my fault. If I were to let the Xeno die, then I'd also lose the loyalty of my second-in-command. "Damn it," I hissed, standing up so fast that the chair nearly tipped over before shouting out to my weapons guy, "Open the vault!" Hearing this, Dwight shot me an incredulous look. "You're not seriously considering going to get him, are you?" he asked, deliberately repositioning himself to stand in my way. Parak may have sped up the repairs, but we still need more time for them to finish, I shrugged, pushing Dwight aside but allowing my hand to linger upon his shoulder. Now I'm not going to ask again. Open the damn vault. As soon as I let go of him, Dwight rushed over to his computer and quickly typed in a command code to unseal the room containing our big guns. With heavily specialized and often expensive ammunition, these weapons were strictly reserved for emergencies. Sprinting a brief distance down the hall and arriving at the vault's entrance, I dashed inside and hurriedly looked over the weapons on offer. Most of them I was confident wouldn't even inconvenience a martyr, but there was one that stuck out as potentially helpful. Approaching the nearest wall of sparse weaponry, I lifted a particle rifle off of its mounting hook and checked the display to make sure it had enough antimatter to fire. Superficially, the weapon looked like a chrome rendition of an old-fashioned Tommy gun, except that its drum was laid flat and embedded into the body. Of course, this drum didn't actually contain any ammunition. Instead, it was a miniaturized particle accelerator, designed to fire sand-grain-sized pieces of depleted uranium at 10% the speed of light. I don't know what you're planning, but I'd like to put on the record that I think it's monumentally stupid, Dwight said over the comms, preemptively absolving himself of responsibility for my inevitable death. The repair mechanisms are still in full swing. If you step outside this ship, they'll turn your brain into scrambled eggs. Only if I look at them, I shrugged in reply, returning to the bridge in order to access my quarters. Digging through the box of clothing that essentially served as my dresser, I tested the fabric of each article by placing them over my eyes. Most items were too thick. I couldn't see a damn thing through them. Then, however, I came to my favorite pair of black pajama sweatpants. Stretching out one of the legs and draping it over my eyes like a blindfold, I was able to vaguely make out my surroundings while still being spared from the finer details. Reaching under my pillow and grabbing the knife stored there, I haphazardly sawed at the left pant leg, cutting out a ring of cloth just wide enough to cover my eyes and forehead. With that, there was no going back. Parak was more than just our engineer. He was essential not only to the Megalodon but also to Avery, not to mention he now owed me a new pair of pajama pants. Once I arrived at the nearest airlock, I draped the makeshift blindfold over my face and opened up the outer gate, staggering awkwardly down the ramp before surveying the nearby service tunnels, my hands all the while kept firmly upon the particle rifle. All around me, machines I had no hope of comprehending whirred and buzzed in total disregard for my presence. Anywhere between 10 seconds and a minute of direct visual exposure was all it would take to cause permanent damage to my psyche. To prevent this, I approached each service tunnel individually, turning up the corner of my blindfold to view the labels, without risking a glimpse of Archeron's law in action. Parak had said that the tunnel he came from was sealed by a bulkhead, so my best option was to approach from another bay. Sprinting down a service tunnel and doing my best to avoid tripping over my own feet, I made my way into the adjacent repair bay before taking a turn and beelining for the control room. What the hell am I doing? I growled to myself, at last realizing just how absolutely insane this plan was. Nobody knew how many martyrs there were in the galaxy. Maybe it was 20, maybe it was 2,000. What was widely known by the public is the number of martyrs killed in action throughout the Council's nearly 700-year reign, too. One of them was killed by orbital antimatter bombardment. The other's cause of death was thoroughly classified. Activating the accelerator to charge up its shot, I stalked across the catwalk overlooking more machinery, the purpose of which I couldn't determine. Back during the early stages of mankind's subjugation, there was a revolt in New York. 200,000 humans rose up to demand their rights. They took several officials, including a council member, hostage, and threatened to use a network of dirty bombs to blow the city sky high unless the council granted freedom to humanity. In response, the Xenos sent what they said was a diplomatic vessel. The martyr on board sure as hell wasn't there for negotiations, though. Within 48 hours, the entire network of bombs was disabled and every last hostage freed. I'd always known the council would eventually get serious about taking us down, but I never thought they'd actually send a martyr to do it. The control room was empty when I arrived. Confident enough that there weren't any exposed Arcturian mechanisms, I risked unveiling one of my eyes to take a look around. Wiring on the AI core seemed to have been tampered with, likely by Parak. 4 tunnels connected to this control room, and of those 4, 2 were sealed off my bulkheads. Distant gunshots rang out through the facility, seemingly having come from the other unsealed tunnel. Hauling ass toward the source of this noise, eventually I arrived at what I assumed to be some kind of assembly line, given the robotic arms and boxes sliding as though on a conveyor belt. Two silhouettes loomed on the catwalk above me. One of them was massive and appeared to be holding the other by their neck. "Where is Ridgeford?" demanded the larger figure in a monotone, robotic voice. Stealthily making my way up the catwalk stairs, curiosity got the better of me, as for just a split second, I lifted my blindfold to catch a glimpse of what was going on, my gaze unhindered for just long enough to comprehend the nightmare before me. The martyr was massive, a towering 9-foot colossus wrought from metal as black as the void between stars. It held Parak aloft by his throat, as though he weighed nothing, its fingers tightening with slow, methodical precision. Curved horns jutted forth from its reinforced skull like twin spikes, framing the broad bovine face between them. Clearly it had been an engril once. The resemblance in body structure was still there, despite now being entirely mechanical. Beneath the black plates encasing it, thick cables flexed and relaxed in a grim mockery of muscle. Taking advantage of the martyr's unaware state, I carefully lined up the barrel of my particle rifle with its center of mass. Against vehicles, these weapons were effective. Against living things, they were downright overkill. Against the galaxy's deadliest soldiers? I was about to find out.